Did you think back to the time when you went to Nashville and Nashville didn't take to you and your music?
Well, what I didn't realize was that Nashville has never really been about live performance.
Are you kidding me? Dwight Yoakam is 68 years old. The man's distinctive voice, fitted jeans, and hat have stood the test of time. However, he is now putting an end to the stories that have persisted about his private life, professional decisions, and even his behind-the-scenes actions for as long as he has performed publicly. Who can tell what's real and what's simply rumor mill chatter? Is he now deciding to speak up? And did he leave something significant behind? Stay tuned, because Dwight just verified something that could alter your perception of him for the rest of time. Nowadays, when people think of Dwight Yoakam, they see his ostentatious career, numerous accolades, and popular songs, but few understand that he had to scrounge his way to success from near obscurity. Dwight was just another dude in Southern California who would bring his guitar to little pubs and attempt to get people to listen long before he became famous. At the time, surfboards and rock bands were more popular than cowboy hats in Southern California. So it's safe to say that the region wasn't exactly begging for more country artists. At the same time, Nashville's country music scene was rapidly evolving into something more polished and commercial. It didn't resonate with Dwight in the slightest. But he redoubled his efforts on the gritty, vintage sounds that had always appealed to him. You know, the type of music that made you feel like you were really there. Playing night after night in clubs that were more like arenas than music venues, it meant that people recognized him, even if it meant he wasn't booked as readily. Even while avoiding beer bottles, Dwight quickly mastered the art of commanding a room. He was alone with his band and his ambition. Neither a public relations firm nor a record label were behind him. One hot, memorable set at a time was the old-fashioned way that word spread. In the end, Dwight decided, hey, maybe Nashville will get it. He gathered all his belongings and drove east. But he soon found out that Music City wasn't keen. Not being a polished studio vocalist or a hit songwriter meant they didn't have time for you. A lot of people would have given up or worked too hard to be perfect. Not Dwight. He never strayed from his original path and never compromised his principles. Surprisingly, his intransigence set in motion a chain reaction that redefined country music in ways he could never have predicted. One bar engagement at a time was Dwight Yoakam's road to stardom, before he packed arenas and topped the charts. He wasn't about stardom so much as the satisfaction that comes from playing music that has depth and meaning. Hardcore fans who didn't care about radio play or accolades knew Dwight was the genuine deal before anyone outside of a smoky bar recognized his name. You can't mimic the tenacity he gained on those tough evenings when he had to win over every crowd in a luxury studio. The final release of Guitar's Cadillacs was more than a new radio single. It was the sound of an individual pounding on a door and expressing his tale in his own unique way. Dwight made a bold statement with his debut album, which was more than simply a debut. He wasn't seeking praise after years of being ignored. Instead, he was prepared to bring back the sound of classic country music before it became too polished. And he achieved great success with Guitars, Cadillacs, etc. An album that was so honest and unfiltered that it injected a surge of energy into a genre that had become overly complacent. Dwight revived the hard Bakersfield sound, tight lyrics, rumbling guitars, and that barroom pulse, with Pete Anderson at the front as producer. It was obvious from the very beginning that Dwight's intention wasn't to fit in, but rather to rouse everyone. Although his rendition of Honky Tonk Man became popular quickly, it was Guitars, Cadillacs that truly resonated with listeners. The song was more than simply catchy. It was Dwight's tale told through music. The years of struggling, the obstinate pride, and the swagger he gained from his hardships were all audible. It was a victory for all those who held on to the hope that music might still have substance, not only on the charts. A double platinum smash hit, the album blew up. Everyone, from country music critics to die-hard fans, was raving about it. Dwight went from playing sweaty venues to headline concerts throughout the country all of a sudden. Not only did he transform his own life, but he also revolutionized country music. He demonstrated that Nashville could still accommodate those who dared to challenge the status quo. It appeared like Dwight had finally gotten his stride, but he quickly turned things around once more. Even though no one had anticipated their collaboration, he eventually joined forces with Beck. Beck was into avant-garde, experimental music that pushed genres to their limits, whereas Dwight was more into traditional country music. It didn't make sense on paper, but some sort of miracle occurred when put into practice. In 2012, they collaborated on 3 pairs, with Beck co-producing 2 songs. Instead, than attempting to change Dwight into someone he wasn't, Beck encouraged him to be more spontaneous and follow his gut rather than second-guess himself. That one moment sums it all up. Dwight recorded this extremely unfinished guitar track for A Heart Like Mine, not meant to be final, but when Beck heard it, he said, "No, that's the one." And with that, Dwight reverted to what had always made him great, not chasing perfection, but chasing real. All of that shattered Dwight's artistic armor. He began incorporating more modern, freer sounds into his songs, while yet maintaining an old-school honesty, which attracted indie and alt-rock lovers who might not have discovered him otherwise. The nicest aspect was that he didn't have to start from scratch. Instead, he could just peel back the layers and get to the essence of his artistic identity. Collaborating with Beck wasn't about following a fad, but rather about pushing oneself, having faith in the chaotic process, and keeping in mind that music should evoke emotions. Authenticity, genuine storytelling, and unfiltered emotion have always been Dwight's strong suits. Dwight Yoakam will forever be remembered in the annals of American music for his unwavering connection to his humble roots, which he maintained through it all, from honky-tonks to sold-out arenas, platinum albums to scratch guitar records. Dwight Yoakam wasn't taking a strange detour when he collaborated with Beck. Rather, he was returning to the reason his fans adored him, doing things his own without being constrained. Dwight had always known he enjoyed performing, even before he heard guitars' Cadillacs blaring from everyone's truck. Getting and keeping people's attention was more important than simply singing. School plays, community theater, you name it, he did it all. He was on every stage imaginable. So that acting bug never went away, not even while his music career was booming. When he eventually got a major film part, as the nefarious Doyle Hargraves in Sling Blade, people were startled. Instead of becoming a cutesy country star for the camera, Dwight brought genuine determination, and it paid off handsomely. "Hold on, this guy's legit," Hollywood said all of a sudden. After that, he became more than a movie industry one-hit wonder. In addition to his appearances on Under the Dome and Wilfred, he continued to feature in edgy films such as Panic Room and Crank. He wasn't attempting to be showy all the time. What made his music great was the genuine, honest attitude he provided. Although acting provided him with a new medium for storytelling, it in no way diverted him from his musical roots. Just on a different sort of platform, it had the same passion and grit. True talent doesn't need to be contained in a single genre. Dwight proved that by branching out from country music to acting. Similar to how he created songs, fully committed and instinctual, Dwight dove headfirst into acting. He would consider what motivated, terrified, and ultimately saved each character, rather than merely reciting lines or acting out their feelings. In his view, there wasn't much of a difference between acting and songwriting. In both fields, You needed to find your groove to evoke strong emotions in your audience. Whether he was portraying a knowledgeable outsider or a rough-around-the-edges villain, Dwight's performances were so lifelike that you couldn't help but believe him. It was a far greater effort for him to win over Nashville in the 1980s before he won folks over in movies. It was all about the urban cowboy attitude in country music, polished tunes, safe looks, and crossover singles. And now we have Dwight, rocking out on twangy Bakersfield guitars while singing about dive bars and heartbreak in tight jeans and a rhinestone jacket with his cowboy hat pulled low. No one in Nashville could have missed him, and they were confused by him. Dwight said, "Forget it." He then stormed out to LA. He continued to make songs he believed in, met individuals who understood him, and performed at rock clubs. By joining forces with Pete Anderson, he intensified his raw honky-tonk sound, which he combined with a touch of rock and roll swagger. The subsequent album, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., was so impressive that it made everyone pay attention, including those who had previously dismissed him because of it. The nicest aspect was that Dwight stayed obstinate, so Nashville had to alter to accommodate him rather than the other way around. For those artists who didn't conform to the norm, he provided a platform. No relationship can maintain the enchantment that Dwight and Pete Anderson had. During their time together, Dwight was able to discover his sound with Pete's guitar and production. Were it not for him, Dwight's career-defining record series, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., might not exist. However, by the early 2000s, things had begun to become rough. Grins and handshakes weren't enough anymore. Then, out of nowhere, in 2004, Pete sued Dwight, claiming that Dwight had financially harmed him by canceling many events. It became nasty since Pete had already spent a lot of money getting ready for those gigs. In the end, they settled out of court, so there was no major public scandal, but let's be honest, things like that hurt. Following the breakup, Dwight began making music independently. He maintained the artistic independence he desired, but the music never sounded the same without Pete. Despite all that went on, most fans still think, "Man, that was the peak Dwight," when they reflect on their time together. It was raw and honest, and it continues to motivate creatives to this day. However, Dwight still had a ways to go in his fights. Not at all. He was already planning his next confrontation with the heavy hitters at Warner Music. When Dwight wanted the rights to his older songs back in 2021, he sued Warner. You see, the Copyright Act finally grants artists the opportunity to reclaim their work after 35 years. Warner essentially said, "Not so fast." They continued selling and streaming his early recordings without license, and Dwight was not having any of it. Owning the songs that he had built his career on was more important than money. Warner made the usual strategy of erecting as many legal obstacles as possible by disputing over paperwork, time, and other irrelevant matters. However, by 2022, they had reached a settlement. We can all assume that Dwight got what he wanted out of the trade, even though no one knows the exact details. I mean, props to him. Fighting for what's rightfully his has never been easy, but Dwight has always been the type of person who refuses to give up. Plus, Dwight wasn't the only one involved. Many seasoned performers had the courage to stand up after seeing it. One thing about Dwight is that he will always do things his way, regardless of how large his opponent is. Then, the South of Heaven and the West of Hell arrived. Dwight did more than perform. He also contributed to the film's writing, directing, and soundtrack. He oversaw the entire process. He cast A-listers like Vince Vaughn, Bridget Fonda, and Billy Bob Thornton in an effort to achieve his goal of fusing classic, grimy Western elements with profound psychological drama. Despite its many redeeming qualities, the film failed to connect with audiences. Messy, self-indulgent, and too ambitious were some of the harsh words used by critics. The plot was confusing, the pacing was choppy, and the tale failed to engage its target demographic. It was a complete financial disaster, both in theaters and on home video. Many assumed that Yoakam's inexperience as a director was to blame. He has the idea, but he could lack the necessary expertise to make it a reality. What started out as a promising breakthrough ended up being a painful reminder that striving too hard might have unintended consequences. Not only did his reputation suffer, but his bank account took a severe beating as well. Investors pulled out in the middle of production, so Yoakam had to use his own money and even take out a loan to make the film. Because of the stress, he had strained relationships with co-workers he'd worked with for years. As a result, some of these relationships ended in disaster, leading to legal action and significant team upheaval. Dwight Yoakam's South of Heaven, West of Hell is still heavily featured, despite its unpopularity. His creative courage is on full display. He gambled a lot, and while it failed, it wasn't a total bust either. Now that it's in the past, most fans and industry insiders can look back and say, all right, that didn't quite work, but they don't write it off completely. Yoakam has been mostly silent on what transpired following that film. The fact that it is brought up again suggests that he isn't the kind to play it safe in order to avoid making a mistake. Even if it brought him to his knees, which we doubt, it simply served to strengthen his will to adhere unwaveringly to his goal, regardless of the difficulty or expense it may entail. Now, let's talk about the great parts he's had in his acting career. He began to land parts that allowed him to showcase his flexibility after his breakout performance in Sling Blade as the fierce and furious Doyle Hargraves. He was one of the most terrifying characters in Panic Room, playing the role of Raoul, a masked invader who was really spooky, didn't say much, and had a cold energy. Since it is so unlike his typical musical style, it caught many off guard and made them think, wait, this guy can act. On the other hand, Yoakam has a light-hearted, eccentric side as well. He made an appearance as a quirky doctor on that strange but great sitcom Wilfred and had a funny cameo in Wedding Crashers. He proved he wasn't limited to playing one sort of part by embracing assignments that let him be outrageous and humorous. Even on television, in shows like Under the Dome, he was able to hold his own, contributing meaningfully while still fitting in with the rest of the cast. He has consistently shown an awareness of the significance of acting throughout. According to his interviews, he tackles acting with the same honesty, passion, and enthusiasm for conveying true tales that he does with music. That he says performing in the theater when still in junior high and high school gave him the self-assurance he needed to portray these parts is endearing. He gained the confidence to follow his intuition when he was younger because to that event. His acting, like his songwriting, was never about seeking celebrity so much as it was about exploring universal human feelings. When he looks back, he can't tell them apart. His acting and singing are only two of his many storytelling mediums. Whether he's on stage or film, he tries to always express something real and honest. Dwight Yoakam has never been afraid to take a unique approach. Whether he's on screen or in concert, his raw, honest, and uniquely himself style successfully combines elements of country and Hollywood. Surprisingly, playing different characters on TV has only served to enhance his natural talent, using music to convey tales. The ability to fully immerse himself in an emotional performance is something he honed as an actor, and it shows in his music. He went so far as to compare the vulnerability required to do an act to that of performing solo guitar. That is, to just show up, be yourself, and let people in. His performances have been greatly enhanced by the integration of acting and music. As a result, Yoakam is no longer preoccupied with the past. but rather plans for the future. Still going strong at 68 years old. Even as he continues to write, tour, and push boundaries, he remains firmly rooted in the country music that inspired him. Despite the genre's recent veering into pop and hip-hop, Yoakam proudly represents its origins. He isn't mired in the past, though. He is only doing his best to keep us from losing sight of our origins. Additionally, he has become a trusted advisor for aspiring musicians. Dwight Yoakam and the Bakersfield Beat, a serious SM show, features underappreciated artists and their music. The best thing is that he hasn't finished exploring yet. There have been hints that he may return to acting, perhaps even dabble in producing or directing. His talent for plot and character development makes it seem like a logical progression. It seems like Dwight Yoakam isn't one to go peacefully into legendom. No matter what he accomplishes, he hasn't stopped making things, changing, and surprising people. The one thing you can count on with Dwight Yoakam is that he always does things his own way. That authenticity and emotional punch that originally drew fans to him is still there whenever he steps onto a movie set, drops a new song, or rips it up on stage. His narrative is far from over, which is the coolest part. Music and film aren't his only legacies. He also influenced the culture that surrounded them. Dwight has always been brave in fusing classic country with his own sound. He has never followed fads, but instead always done what he thought was right. He isn't idling away his time, even if the music industry is always evolving. Even as he forges deeper bonds with his audience, he's always discovering new paths to pursue. Not only are his longtime fans still around, but a new generation is finding him by streaming his classics, seeing him in collaborations, and understanding that some sounds will never go out of style.